On August 3rd, as the light armor drove toward Falaise, 8th Air Force heavy bombers struck at Nazi-held oil facilities near Merkweiler, 25 miles north of Strasbourg, France. These recon photos show the installations before and after the attack. 106 B-17s flying at 20,000 feet dropped 260 tons of bombs on what was then the only refinery of importance in operation on French soil. By the end of November, Merkweiler was captured, and these scenes, taken in December, show some of the bomb damage to the oil installations. Utilizing crude oil drawn from local fields, the refinery had a crude intake capacity of 12,000 tons a month. The crude stock contained a good quality lubricating oil, and the plant was completely equipped with acid, clay treating, and dewaxing facilities, as well as a cracking coil to augment the naturally low gasoline yield. This was one of the most important Axis-used oil installations outside of Romania. Now, nearly every building that had contributed to this plant's annual output of 5,000 tons of motor lubricants was damaged or destroyed. The oil stored in its 80,000-ton capacity storage tanks, desperately needed to help face the onrushing Allied armies, was consumed by fires that burned for over 20 hours. This attack on Merkweiler was part of a systematic assault against German oil that had begun months back. Heavy damage had already been visited on Nazi refineries, synthetic petroleum plants, and oil storage dumps. But in August, this offensive reached new peaks as the 8th and the 15th Air Forces sent as many as 2,900 planes across Nazi-held Europe in a single day to burn out German oil from Hamburg to the Sudetenland and Ploiești. During this month, the 8th Air Force alone bombed 26 oil plants in Europe and made 35 attacks on oil storage dumps. Transportation facilities servicing the refinery were also attacked. Tracks and rolling stock in the rail yard destroyed. By month's end, German production in terms of the monthly pre-attack level was down to 52% for all oil, 42% for gasoline, and 32% for lubricants. Translated in physical terms, these percentages meant stalled Nazi tank regiments, mobile gun companies being forced to fight wherever their fuel gave out, armored vehicles of all kinds abandoned in parks from which they could not be withdrawn. With oil facilities still a #1 priority target, the situation for the Nazi can only become worse as dwindling reserves vanish and as continued bombardment brings home the simple truth that a modern war machine cannot operate without oil. Running interference for the Allied ground advance up the Italian boot, the Air Force has done a notable job in strangling vital Nazi supply lines. At Poggibonsi on the alternate Florence-Rome line, the Tactical Air Force raid of last April shows how much of this strangling was accomplished by destroying key railroad bridges. This span just north of the town was difficult to hit, easy to repair, had to be bombed repeatedly to keep it out of use. 12th Air Force mediums pinpointed it to destruction during April and May of 1944. In November 1944, Air Force combat cameras at the scene of these bombings verified the extensive damage that earlier recon photos indicated. The ceaseless pounding that produced this meant defeat for German forces to the south. Throttled from lack of supplies, when communication links like this at Poggibonsi were severed, the Nazis were forced to withdraw farther up the boot. Downed bridges, wrecked tracks, and roads were the vices that helped British and Americans and their fighting allies compress the Nazis ever to the north. In the spring of '44, as the Allied drive rolled north, the Florence marshalling yards were pulverized. Mediums and heavies expended only 200 tons of bombs to lay waste the largest marshalling yards between Rome and the Po Valley. These Florence yards, hit for the first time in March '44, were found to be a total loss when American troops reached them 6 months later. Bomb craters 25 feet wide, 15 feet deep, remained as gravestones to Nazi supplies and rolling stocks. Delayed action bombs caused much of this devastation. That none of it touched Florence itself beautiful center of Italian art and culture, is potent testimony to the expert precision of our tactical air force. The capture of Florence was an important step in our long march up the road to the Po Valley. Nearly half of Italy's population lives in the manufacturing cities of the valley and on the prosperous fertile land. And these ruined marshalling yards at Florence interlace with many railroad lines of this center of Italian industry. The yards were also soon to become a necessary link in the Allied supply chain, stretching from the port of Leghorn to our Fifth Army and the British Eighth. In the face of an almost impossible task, Allied teamwork and ingenuity made the twisted, battered yards operational in 5 weeks, and the enormous great needs of all the Allies in the sector were met. At Ponte Sieve, 10 miles east of Florence, the railroad station, adjacent warehouses and repair shops were wrecked after several bombings. Through this small marshalling yard runs the main Florence-Rome double-track electric railroad. Bombs that missed the small target demolished much of the town across the Sieve River. A road bridge over the Sieve has a single Bailey bridge spanning a bombed-out gap. And at the yard's eastern end, a destroyed 3-track railroad bridge nullified the Rome-Florence junction of lines to Coenza and Bologna. Through the Futa Pass, north of Florence, on the road to Bologna, went Allied truck convoys in September. Past artillery-ripped forests, the supplies moved up to front-line positions as American and British troops drove to within 15 miles of Bologna after breaching the enemy's Gothic line despite its tank traps and pillboxes. Firenzuola, just east of the now useless strong point of Futa Pass, was next captured. This bomb-gutted town, when held by the Nazis, had been destroyed by B-25s. American and British troops moving side by side in this sector looked with satisfaction at the results of our Air Force job that had implemented their arduous campaign. Beside wrecked houses, this church stood intact. Shelled-out bridges on our supply roads to the front received emergency repair from combat engineers. Bad roads often caused traffic jams, but no delays or handicaps stopped the steady Allied pressure against the Gothic line. Fall fog enveloped Highway 65, main road from Florence to Bologna, and supply trucks felt their way to the front 2 miles ahead, where the infantry confidently depended on these drivers to get through. At Savione, the road was lined with wreckage brought by our P-47 wing tank incendiary bombs. Arduously but surely, these towns were becoming known as former German positions because of intelligent coordination between our various forces. Observation planes charted targets for gun position survey crews. Ambulances, ammo trucks, and infantry were ever present, ready to go into action as effectively as the 105s. .90mm field pieces spoke steadily against Nazi stubbornness. All Allied elements geared themselves to the one purpose of driving the enemy back out of the Po Valley. And as the campaign froze into the bitter winter months ahead, it was clear that in the fight for Italy, the effort of every unit counted.